whispers in the dark. The moon was low over the darkness of the thick forest, casting feathery silver light upon the winding path that led to the small, seemingly forgotten village of Eshkolot. Eliezer Cohen rubbed the chill off his face as the cold wind bit at him through the tattered folds of his coat. He wasn't traveling alone. Naomi Lev stood quietly beside him, her flashlight growing bright in the mist. Behind them trudged along a skeptic journalist, Isaac Feldman, grumbling about the eerie silence that surrounded them. A letter arrived on the parchment at Eliezer's Jerusalem study, addressed to him alone. There was no return address on the envelope. In precise Hebrew, it called upon him to find a lost treasure long hidden, Sefer Hatzalmavet, the Book of Shadows. The sender only referred to himself as the Keeper. He said it was hidden near Eshkolot, in a temple forgotten by time. "This doesn't feel right," Isaac muttered, breaking the silence. An anonymous letter? A hidden book that's supposedly cursed? Sounds like a setup for a bad horror story. Naomi chuckled. "Then why did you agree to come?" "To prove you both wrong." They walked into the village, but there was no life. Only houses old, with wooden beams sagging beneath the weight of time. Light filtered through some windows, but there was no sign of anyone. Eliezer came to one of the homes and knocked. A long time went by before an elderly man opened the door. His eyes were deep and tired, scrutinizing the strangers standing in his doorway. "You came for the book," the man said, his voice gravelly. "Yes," said Eliezer. "I got a letter." He was interrupted by, "I know. Come with me." The man introduced himself as Reuven and led them to the center of the village where an ancient synagogue stood, partially crumbling and yet regal. The air was heavy with the scent of damp wood and decay. Reuven lit a lantern, revealing a stone pedestal in the center of the room, on top of which lay a box covered in black cloth. "The book is here," said Reuven, "but beware it carries a curse." Eliezer advanced, heart thudding. The whisper came across him. The whispers, like lost tongues, heard no more. Naomi opened her lips in a gasp, and Isaac's flashlight flared. "Do you hear that?" Naomi asked on a quivering breath. The voices had gone louder and intensified into a guttural chant. The air turned colder, and the flame of the lantern turned blue. Eliezer stopped dead in his tracks. His hand hovered over the box as a sense of impending doom gripped him. Then, without warning, the chanting stopped and the room fell silent. Reuven's face was ashen. "It started," he whispered. "You mustn't fail, or we're all done for." The synagogue fell silent, but the chill remained in the air. Eliezer Cohen stood frozen, his hand inches from the black cloth-wrapped box. His mind raced with questions, but the stillness around him was deafening. The whispers, though gone, seemed to linger in the corners of the room like uninvited guests. "Don't just stand there," Isaac hissed, gripping his flashlight tightly. "Let's leave this cursed place. We've seen enough." Eliezer shook his head, his thirst for knowledge getting the better of his growing fear. "If the legends are true, this book holds secrets for centuries locked away. Secrets that could reassemble everything we know about mysticism." Naomi stepped closer to him, her eyes locked onto the pedestal. "But at what price, Eliezer? Did you not hear those voices? This is no ordinary artifact. What stands guard here is something alive." Reuven, old as he was, sighed heavily. "You're blind if you think you'll take it without consequences," he told them, his voice shaking. "The Book of Shadows is guarded as much as it's bound to the darkness. When you take it, it's going to awaken forces you don't really understand." Despite the warning, Eliezer's hands rose, almost instinctively, to lift the box with a cautious yet firm grip. The cloth felt cold and damp, as if it had been left out in the rain, though the room was dry. As he unwrapped it, the room seemed to darken, the lantern's glow growing dimmer. Beneath this cloth lay a bound book. The cover seemed to be some shred of something that looked like ancient cracked leather. There was no title. Instead, a strange sigil was burned into the surface, a symbol that writhed and moved if focused upon too long. Naomi gasped. "That's the mark of Lilith," she whispered. "The demoness from Jewish folklore." Isaac backed away, his skepticism giving way to visible panic. "All right, that's it. This is no ordinary find, Eliezer. We're dealing with something far beyond archaeology." Eliezer ignored him, his fingers tracing the edges of the sigil. "This could explain so much," he murmured. "The ancient rituals, the myths about shadow realms, it all leads back to this." As he opened the book, the air in the room seemed to shift. The pages were made of some unidentifiable material, flickering with dim light where Hebrew text pulsed faintly as if alive. Strange diagrams of humanoid shapes, surrounded by glyphs and symbols, decorated the margins. Then, as he stepped into the synagogue, one word snatched his attention. Azkara, a word that symbolized commemoration and incantation. Just as he was about to find out more, pandemonium occurred. A fierce gust blew in from nowhere and blew out the lantern. Silhouettes ran along the walls at a speed unbelievable to humans, assumed shapes which were impossible to explain, twisting, clawing, merging. A low growl came, then the faint sound of laughter, far away but freezing. Naomi screamed as her flashlight flickered and died. Isaac cursed under his breath, fumbling for his phone's light. Eliezer clutched the book tightly to his chest, his voice shaking. "Reuven, what's happening?" The old man, now cowering near the entrance, cried out. "You've awakened it! The guardian has been disturbed!" From across the room, in a corner of the darkness, a shadow started to materialize. He was tall and grotesque, with elongated limbs and hollow eyes that glowed faintly red. The figure spoke, its voice a mix of growls and whispers. "You dare touch what is not yours." Reuven falls to the ground on his knees, incoherently muttering prayers, while Isaac stands before him, pale and trembling, holding his phone to take a picture of the entity, only for it to swat the device from his hand with an action so fast that it only blurs into view. Naomi takes Eliezer by the arm. "We have to get out of here, now!" But Eliezer stood his ground, his gaze locked with the entity's hollow eyes. Summoning all his courage, he spoke. "We mean no harm. We only seek knowledge." The entity paused for a moment, tilting its head as if considering his words. Then it laughed, a deep, resonating sound that shook the walls. "Knowledge? Foolish mortal. Knowledge comes at a price, and the price for this knowledge is your soul." Before people could say a word, the shadows surged forward and consumed the room. Delicate, touch-like tendrils wrapped themselves around the bodies, pulling them toward the pedestal. Eliezer clung to his book, his mind racing for a solution. Then, before the darkness engulfed them, Naomi shouted, "The symbol!" "Focus on the symbol." Eliezer looked down at the cover of the book. The sigil blazed now, and the energy surged within it, somehow repelling the shadows. He did not think. He simply pressed his hand against it and whispered the word etched into his mind. Azkara. With a blinding flash of illumination, the shadows were hurled back, as if the very fabric of existence screamed in agony. The creature let out a deafening roar, then dissolved into nothingness. The group collapsed to the floor, gasping for breath as the room returned to its eerie silence. Reuven was the first to speak, his voice barely a whisper. "You don't understand what you've done. The Guardian is only the beginning. You've unleashed something far worse." Eliezer looked at the book in his hands, its pages now blank except for one line scrawled in blood-red text. "The covenant is broken. The gates will open." The air in the synagogue was oppressive, as if the shadows had left behind a weight. Eliezer's chest rose and fell quickly as he held the ancient book. Naomi knelt beside him, her hand on his shoulder, tight, while Isaac rested against the wall, pale and shaking. Reuven sat on the cold floor, his murmured prayers the only sound breaking the silence. The blood-red line on the page of the book burned into Eliezer's mind. The covenant is broken. The gates will open. "What does it mean?" Naomi asked, her voice quivering. Eliezer wiped the sweat from his brow and reopened the book, hoping to find answers. Where once blank pages now existed of strange glyphs and diagrams and text in a language not necessarily Hebrew, but somehow reminding of it, he traced a finger over one of the diagrams, a circular gate with intricate symbols surrounding its edges. "It's a warning," he whispered. "The gates, they're real. This isn't just folklore. They're connected to another realm." Isaac's laugh was hollow, humorless. "Another realm? Are you hearing yourself? We barely survived whatever that thing was, and you're talking about realms." Reuven stood shakily, his old knees creaking as he rose. "The gates of Sheol," he said gravely. "The shadow realm. It's a place where the damned wander, ruled by forces beyond human comprehension. The covenant that sealed it has kept our world safe for centuries." Naomi frowned. "And now we've broken it." Reuven nodded, his face etched with despair. "By disturbing the book, you have weakened the seal. The first guardian is gone, but others will come. And when the gates open fully, there will be no stopping the darkness." Isaac ran a hand through his hair, pacing nervously. "So, what do we do? Destroy the book? Burn it?" "No exclamation mark," Eliezer exclaimed, surprising himself. "If you destroy it, you may let the power go entirely. We must find a way to make up with the covenant." Reuven pointed to the distant corner of the synagogue, toward a trap door that lay half buried beneath debris. "There may be answers below. This synagogue was erected on top of the remnants of a far older temple, one tied into the ancient covenant. But I warn you, what lies beneath is not for mortal eyes." Still, Eliezer found his resolve harden. "If the answers are there, we have to find them." Naomi hesitated, but nodded. Isaac groaned. "This is suicide," he muttered, but nevertheless trailed behind. The trapdoor creaked open on hinges, showing a stone staircase that spiraled downwards into darkness. Reuven handed them a lantern, his hands shaking. "I cannot follow you," he said. "My time is near, and my prayers are needed here. Go, but tread carefully." The three walked down, the air getting colder with every step. On the walls were carved ancient symbols, which meant something no one knew anymore. Naomi held the lantern high, casting its rays on the pathway as Isaac brought up the rear, grumbling to himself. The stairway came to a dead end in a vast underground chamber, with the ceiling lost in the shadows. Lining the great space were pillars of black stone that bore etched glowing red runes. At center stood an altar, with 7 smaller pedestals holding various objects: dagger, chalice, scroll, candle, mirror, key, and chain. Eliezer stepped forward cautiously, his eyes scanning the altar. The book in his hands seemed to grow heavier, as if it recognized that place. "These objects, they are part of the ritual," he murmured. Naomi approached closer to a pedestal, her fingers hovering over the mirror. The face she didn't see on its surface, only a whirling void. "This is not just a temple," she said. "It's a gateway." Suddenly the chamber shuddered. A deep sound resounded through the air, accompanied by a low growl. Shadows gathered in the corners of the room and began to take on the forms of vaguely humanoid creatures with twisted, incomplete bodies. Isaac took a step back. "Not again. No way." Eliezer riffled through the pages of the book, his hands shaking. "The ritual. We have to perform the ritual to restore the seal." "What ritual?" Naomi shouted, panic creeping into her voice. Eliezer stopped on a page, showing the altar and the objects. It wrote an ancient incantation, and the text required each object to be applied in one specific sequence, but the words faded into illegible scratches. In the depths of his voice, Eliezer said, "We are missing pieces." Shadows advanced, their hollow eyes aglow. Naomi took up the dagger from its pedestal, adopting a defensive stance. Isaac grasped the chain, not knowing what it was for but willing to grasp at anything. A voice boomed in the room, its bass resonant and wicked. "You cannot unbreak what is broken. The gates are ours now." A figure emerged from the darkness, more developed and higher than the rest of them. It was cloaked in flowing black smoke, skeletal hands, a skull, and then void. Eliezer stepped forward, holding out the book. "We didn't come to destroy. We came to repair the covenant." The figure laughed, and the sound ran within their bones. "The covenant was sealed in blood. If you would restore it, you must pay in kind." Naomi's grip on the dagger tightened. What sort of sacrifice? The figure reached out a skeletal hand towards her. "A soul freely given. One of the three must remain here, tied to the gate." The room fell silent as the weight of the words settled in. Isaac shook his head violently. "Number absolutely not. There must be another way." The mind raced in Eliezer. Could he sacrifice himself to save the others? But even as the thought crossed his mind, he knew the decision wouldn't come easily. The shadows crept closer, their forms flickering with anticipation. Naomi stepped forward, her expression resolute. "If that's what it takes, I'll—" "No!" Eliezer interrupted, grabbing her arm. "There's still another way. There has to be." The figure tilted its head, amused. "You have little time, mortals. Choose, or be consumed." The room was full of anticipation for some impending doom, and shadows twirled with sinister forms becoming clearer at every moment. The skeletal figure towered over the three, its sunken, shifting face a picture of malice. Its words hung in the air like a death warrant. "A soul willingly given." Naomi's heart pounded in her chest as she glanced at Eliezer and Isaac. The dagger in her hand felt like a lead weight. Her resolve faltered when she saw the fear in their eyes. They had risked everything to come this far, but now they stood on the precipice of a choice no one was prepared to make. "There has to be another way," he declared loudly, his voice firm but desperate. He scoured page after page of the book for any clue, any loophole. The pages of the book seemed to mock him, their ancient symbols writhing and shifting as if alive. The shadowed figure laughed, its voice echoing like the distant scream of a woman. "There is no other way. The covenant was forged in blood, and only through blood can it be sealed anew." Isaac, pale and shaking, let drop the chain he had been carrying. "This is insane," he muttered. We can't just pick some poor soul to die. There has to be another way." Naomi stepped forward, her grip on the dagger tightening. "If this is what it takes to stop this, then—" "No!" Eliezer interrupted, grabbing her wrist. His voice cracked as he pleaded with her. "There's something we're missing. The covenant was made to protect humanity. If we can understand how it was forged, we might be able to replicate it without—" He couldn't finish the sentence. The figure's hollow gaze shifted toward him, its skeletal hand reaching out. "You waste time. Every moment you delay brings the gate closer to opening. The longer you linger, the more your world will fall into shadow." Eliezer gazed at the ancient being. His mind racing, he then asked, "If we give you a soul, does that end it? Will the gates be sealed forever?" The figure tilted its head, as if deciding the answer. "Gates will be closed, but forever is a lie mortals tell themselves. The covenant will hold for now." The words provided no solace, only the bleak world of momentary reprieve. But a realization came to Eliezer, one he dare not speak aloud. The creature was bound by rules, just as the covenant itself was. Maybe there was a way to break those rules. "Wait," Eliezer said, holding up the book. "We can't make any decision without first reading the original covenant." The figure hesitated, its form flickering. "You wish to know the truth? Then you shall see it." The room shook as the skeletal figure reached forward to Eliezer. A blinding light wrapped around him and his vision grayed over. When the light faded, he found himself standing in another time, another place. He was in a desert, the air heavy with heat and tension. Before him, there stood 7 figures robed each of them holding one of the ritual objects which he had seen upon the pedestals. All chanted together, their voices formed one melody, a sweep and a chant of puissance. In the center of their circle stood a massive stone gate, its surface covered in glowing sigils. A figure stepped forward from the crowd, his face hidden in a hood. He held the book, the same one Eliezer had just received, and began speaking with a voice of power. "To seal the gate, we give our blood, our soul, and our will. Let the shadow be bound by our sacrifice." Each of the robed figures laid down his object, then slit their palms, allowing drops of blood to fall onto the stone. The gate accepted the offering, its sigils growing stronger with every drop. He watched, horrified, as the last figure threw off his hood to reveal a young woman, her face serene, her eyes with the look of sorrow and resolve. She knelt before the gate, whispering one final incantation. There was a flash of light, and the gate closed, the young woman's body thrown to the ground, lifeless. The vision blurred, and Eliezer was back in the underground chamber. He stumbled, his weight lessened by what he had seen. Naomi caught him before he fell. "What happened?" "What did you see?" "The first covenant," he said, his voice as faint as the light that echoed in the chamber. It was not just one soul, it was all of them, 7 sacrifices, willing to bind the shadow realm. Isaac muttered an oath under his breath. "And you expect us to find 6 more volunteers? We don't even have one." Eliezer shook his head. "We don't need 6. The ritual was meant to be renewed, not repeated. We can merge the objects of the ritual with the right incantation, and maybe 1 sacrifice would be enough. But we do not know the right words." Naomi looked at the book. "And those words aren't in there, are they?" Eliezer did not reply. The shadowed figure leaned in impatiently, towering over them. "Your time is up. Choose or perish." Eliezer's mind was racing. "What if we make a deal?" The figure hesitated for a moment, its hollow eyes narrowing. "A deal?" "Yes," Eliezer said, moving forward. "Instead of a soul, what if we offer something else? Something of equal value?" And with the laughter, which sent shivers down their backs, there was no trace in his voice of smugness. "There is nothing more precious than a soul." "But what of knowledge?" Eliezer argued. "You exist to guard the gates, to watch the covenant." "Well, there's something you do not know, something I can trade for." The creature cocked its head. "Would you risk knowledge you do not have?" Eliezer held up the book. "This book isn't just a tool, it's a key. And a key can open more than one door. If I can uncover what lies beyond the gates, I'll share it with you. In return, you seal the gates without taking a soul." Naomi grabbed his arm. "Are you insane? You don't even know what's in there." "I don't have to," Eliezer said, his voice firm. "We just need time. If we can delay the ritual, we might find another way to restore the covenant without anyone dying." The figure seemed to consider this, its form flickering. "You play a dangerous game, mortal, but I accept your terms, for now." The shadows began to recede as the room grew lighter. The figure's voice was the last to fade into the darkness. "Your reprieve is only temporary. If you fail, the gates will open, and all will be lost." The chamber stood silent, save for the faint hum of the glowing ritual objects. Shadows retreated into the edges of the room, leaving the trio alone with the oppressive weight of their task. Eliezer clutched the ancient book, his knuckles white, as the skeletal figure's voice echoed in his mind. Your reprieve is temporary. If you fail, the gates will open, and all will be lost. Naomi adjusted her grip on the dagger, her resolve hardening. So, what now? We have time, but not much. What's the plan? Eliezer sat cross-legged on the cold stone floor, the book spread open before him. We need to decode the incantation for the new covenant. The original ritual involved 7 sacrifices, but we're only 3. If I'm right, the ritual objects can act as conduits to channel our will. We'll need to be precise, or it won't hold. Isaac slumped against a pillar, his arms folded. And what if it doesn't? What if this whole bargain was just a stall tactic for that thing to win? Naomi gave him a glare. Then we try again and again until it works. Isaac sighed. You make it sound so simple, but we're not exactly experts in whatever this is. Eliezer ignored the bickering, his focus on the symbols glowing faintly on the altar. They shifted and pulsed like a heartbeat, responding to the energy in the room. The ritual objects, the dagger, chalice, scroll, candle, mirror, key, and chain, seemed to hum with latent power. Each object stands for a tenet of the covenant, Eliezer said aloud. Sacrifice, wisdom, light, reflection, choice, binding, and blood. The spell will require us to embody these precepts. Naomi scrunched up her face. How do we embody them? Is there something in particular that we need to do? He nodded. We must give over something of ourselves, our will, our memories, our feelings. Shadows feed off the intangible. That is why the first covenant required souls. But if we can give enough of ourselves, perhaps we can tip the scales without anyone dying. The 3 proceeded to lay out the ritual tools on the altar, laying them out according to the instruction of the book. The dagger seemed to sparkle ominously as Naomi placed it, its blade reflecting the faint light emanating from the runes. The chalice, empty though it was, felt too heavy as Isaac placed it alongside the dagger. One by one, they were aligned, and their collective energy created a low buzz that filled the chamber. Naomi lit the candle. The flame would swim in an unusual, thriving movement, alive. There was no reflection in the mirror, but shadows writhed within its surface, like something watching them. The chain coiled like a serpent, and the key pulsed with a faint red glow. Eliezer placed the scroll last, unrolling it carefully. Its surface was blank at first, but as it touched the altar, text appeared, written in the same writhing symbols as the book. It's the incantation, he said, his voice trembling, but it's incomplete. Naomi stepped closer, peering over his shoulder. Can you read it? Not entirely, Eliezer admitted, but I recognize some of the symbols. They're tied to the objects. If we channel the right energy into each one, the rest of the incantation might reveal itself. Isaac groaned. Great. So we guess and hope we don't blow ourselves up? Eliezer shot him a sharp look. It's not guesswork, it's intent. We have to focus on what each object represents and give a part of ourselves willingly. It's the only way. As they prepared, the chamber began to shudder. The shadows at the edges of the room surged forward, coalescing into monstrous forms. The skeletal figure reappeared, its hollow eyes burning with anticipation. You are out of time, it declared, its voice echoing through the room. The gates weaken. Complete the ritual, or perish. Naomi stepped forward, dagger in hand. We're working on it. Back off. The figure laughed, a cold, mirthless sound. Foolish mortals, you think you can outwit forces older than your world. Your defiance is amusing. Eliezer paid no mind to the sneers as he concentrated on the incantation. He put his hands on the book and spoke in a soft voice, reading as much as he could translate. The altar ignited at every syllable. The shadows rushed at him again, and Naomi threw herself at one of them with the dagger, cutting it into form. It broke apart, but another took its place. Isaac swung the chain, pushing back another shadow. "Eliezer, hurry!" Naomi shouted. "I need more time!" He shrieked back, sweat running down his face. The energy of the room was becoming unbearable to stand within. The shadows howled in anguish, their forms shifting like wisps of smoke as the light from the altar intensified. The skeletal figure edged forward, its presence crushing. "You cannot complete the covenant without a price," it spat. "The balance demands it." Eliezer's hands trembled as he realized the truth. Despite their efforts, the ritual would not hold without a sacrifice. The covenant required more than will. It required loss. Naomi seemed to reach the same conclusion. She gripped the dagger tightly and turned to Eliezer. "If it has to be someone, it'll be me. You're the one who can finish this. Isaac can help you. I'll stay behind." "No!" Eliezer cried, his voice cracking. "We are not doing this. There has to be another way." Isaac caught Naomi by the arm. "She's right," he said. "It has to be someone, and she's the only one who'll do." Eliezer's mind was racing. Then he looked at the book and the altar, where the objects seemed to glow with possibility. "Wait, maybe it doesn't have to be a soul. Maybe we can offer something else, something equally valuable." Naomi frowned. "Like what?" "Our memories," Eliezer said. "Our identities. If we pour enough of ourselves into the ritual, it might work, but we'll lose who we are in the process." Isaac hesitated. "You mean wipe ourselves clean? Start over?" Eliezer nodded grimly. "It's the only way to seal the gate without blood." Naomi and Isaac exchanged a glance, then nodded. Together, they placed their hands on the altar. Eliezer led the chant, his voice steady against the tears streaming down his face. As they poured their memories, their emotions, their very essence into the ritual, the objects glowed bright, the shadows recoiling in agony. The skeletal figure howled its form, unraveling as the light consumed it. The room shook violently, and the altar was shrouded in a blinding flash. And when the light went, the chamber was dumb. The shadows fled, and the altar ran chill. The three lay motionless in the floor. Naomi was the first to stir, her eyes unfocused. Where am I?" Isaac sat up, his face unqueered. "I don't remember." Eliezer stood shakily, still clutching the book in his hands. Its pages were blank once more. He looked at his companions, strangers now, and forced a weak smile. "We did it," he whispered. But deep in the shadows, a faint glow remained, a reminder that the gates were never truly gone, only delayed.